we are doing it live tonight because, as you probably are aware, your phones have been blowing up. The tweets from all the beat writers. The MLB trade deadline has come, and now the MLB trade deadline has gone. We're going to break it all down here for you. I'm Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway on Twitter. And with me, as always, riding shotgun here is Matt Selz. Follow him on Twitter, or excuse me, X, at the Selz Man. So, Matt, how is everything going for you? Because I can tell you I am exhausted.
Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy ride for the last few days, right? Like this started, I don't know, do we want to give credit for the Rangers jumping this off with getting a Aroldis Chapman like 2 weeks ago? And then it's just picked up steam, right? And then we had some teams that should have been sellers that turned out to be buyers and vice versa. And then some others that just sat there and watched the Twitter scroll happen. Like, I don't know what some of these teams are doing. So, yeah, I'm kind of exhausted. I don't know what to make of a lot of these trades. So hopefully you and I can talk through them together and, get opinions, see what's up. But yeah, it's been a little nuts.
Yeah, to say the least. It's been very interesting. Every deadline is unique in its own way. Last year was headlined by the Juan Soto deal and the boatload of prospects that they got back for him for those high name pedigree prospects. And then this deadline, we had a couple higher pedigree prospects go, but no Juan Soto-esque deal in terms of a whole package of prospects. I mean, obviously we had Justin Verlander go back to Houston. We've seen some other big pitchers move, but in terms of the prospects, we'll get into those and some of the deals that are worth noting. But Matt, I sent you a message earlier this afternoon, and I said, this trade deadline seems to be the trade deadline of the pitcher. We always see bullpen arms go. That's inevitable. You always need those bullpen guys. But when you think about it, if you were to ask, I don't know, 8 to 10 random people and to say, hey, the MLB trade deadline, let me say random people as in still baseball fans, name 3 players that were traded, I would say the majority of them are going to give you 3 pitchers that were traded. Like the marquee names dealt were all pitchers. So do you think that this trade deadline was the week of the pitcher or the deadline of the pitcher?
For sure. I mean, once Shohei Ohtani, who I guess counts as both a bat and a pitcher, right? Because he's awesome and a unicorn. Once he was taken off the market, it pretty well became, well, what are the other starting pitchers out there? Nobody was really, I mean, the fact that Jeimer Candelario, who we'll talk about in a minute, was the number 1 bat available at the deadline should tell you something. Now, he's had a remarkable first half with the Nationals. But that should tell you all you need to know. Yeah, Scherzer dealt, Verlander dealt, Lucas Giolito dealt. The Orioles made I don't know if we want to call it a splash here or not, but Jack Flaherty was dealt. Dylan Cease was not. So there's that. Yeah, it's a lot of starting pitching help for teams that needed it. And again, some teams that we thought needed it didn't do anything. Eduardo Rodriguez was tried to be traded, and then he said no to the Dodgers, which I'm getting a real kick out of. But yeah, I mean, it's quite clear that this was the deadline of the ace to bolster your staff for the postseason run.
Yep, and then per a tweet that I'm seeing that was retweeted, it sounds like it was Eduardo Rodriguez nixed the deal due to citing a desire to remain closer to family on the East Coast. So that seems to be what happened there. That was the deal that got nixed by Eduardo Rodriguez. But let's start with some of the marquee pitcher deals that we saw. None other than Justin Verlander going back to the Houston Astros. I told you before we jumped on, they're trying to run it back. Houston is getting the boys back together. They're getting the band back together. They're trying to make that championship run again. And it's really hard to falter them because Verlander is a quality arm, obviously. He has the postseason experience, absolute bulldog on the mound. And they gave a couple prospects to get him. So what did you make of this deal? At face value, you see a top prospect, I would say, head back over to the Mets in this one. And obviously the Astros get another frontline arm. So now they can go into the rotation with their gaggle of aces that they have on the mound. So what did you make of this Verlander trade? Because you're the one that wrote it up in the Fantasy Baseball MLB Trade Deadline tracker that we had going on over at fantasyalarm.com.
So on its surface, I think it's interesting, right? Obviously, Verlander had a no trade clause. He was going to be able to dictate where he wanted to go. Clearly, going back to Houston, where he's won 2 Cy Youngs and 2 World Series, and he's very familiar with that team, made a lot of sense. But from a prospect standpoint, a lot of people, including myself, didn't think they had enough guys to get a deal done. And I'm still not 100% sure that the Dodgers couldn't have topped it. I don't know how far down the road they got. Obviously, Verlander had a no trade clause, so maybe he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to LA, so don't even pay attention to him." The Orioles were supposedly in it for a little bit. Don't know what they offered, but I mean, Drew Gilbert is a top 100 prospect in my book. I think most people agree with that. Ryan Clifford, he's number 3 in the Houston system for me right now. I think they're pretty similar players. They're both going to be decent average guys. We're talking 270 to 280. They're going to be decent pop guys. I think Gilbert has a little bit more pop with like 25 home run upside. I think Clifford a little lower. I would say Gilbert has a little bit more speed as well, like 25 steals, and Clifford doesn't really have that. Clifford is a lefty. Gilbert's a righty, so you get the lefty-righty outfield there. But basically what it comes down to is that Steve Cohen used his money to buy better prospects, is essentially what he did in this deal and the Scherzer deal where he got Ronald Acuna's little brother, who, by the way, is really good. But yeah, it's basically that Steve Cohen used his wallet and said, hey, let's go buy some better prospects. And you got to trust the guys in the room that they know what they're looking at. I don't know 100% that I trust Billy Epler with evaluating talent, considering the fact that he didn't do jack squat for the Angels. Perry Maniason has turned them around quite quickly in like 2 years. But it is what it is, right? Maybe Verlander only ever said, I want to go to Houston, and they had to deal with that, and that's what they were able to get. So we'll see. It's a couple year rebuild now for the Mets, who, interestingly, and I don't know if you heard this, but if you count the dead money from the Mets contracts that they're paying people not to be on the team next year, the dead money for the Mets is probably going to be the 7th highest payroll in baseball at like $160 million. I mean, they're paying $90 million to Scherzer and Verlander to not pitch for the Mets.
Yeah, and then the haul they got back for those in dynasty formats. I know you mentioned a little bit about them. What are we thinking? It would be pretty foolish for them to call them up here, for the Mets to call these guys up here down the stretch. We're not going to see them here
No.
this season. Gilbert, higher ranked, probably a better chance to see him in 2024 if things go well. Is that kind of what you're looking at? And then what about Clifford then as well?
Yeah, Clifford's a little bit further behind. He's 20 and he's in high A, class A, depending on what the Mets decide to do with his assignment. Drew Gilbert is 22 and he's in double A. I don't know if you want to really. I got into a little bit of a Twitter discussion about this the other day about how people are knocking Drew Gilbert because he's 22 and in double A. Here's the thing. He was drafted in the in the first round of last year's draft out of college. So I don't know what you wanting to do exactly other than be on the Angels track and be Zach Neto. I don't know. But interestingly, Blade Tidwell, who was a top 10 prospect for the Mets, was a college teammate of Gilbert's at the University of Tennessee and was also drafted last year about, 10 picks after Gilbert was. So I would expect Gilbert to be up probably mid-2024, considering the fact he's got 60 games under his belt at Double-A this year. I would expect Clifford to be up probably mid-2025. And if we believe what the front office told Max Scherzer before they traded him, that they're gearing up for 25, probably 26, it's a pretty safe bet that we're not going to see a lot of their top prospects until about mid-2024 at best.
And obviously, Verlander was one right-handed arm that they dealt, the other being Max Scherzer. He goes to Texas. Texas is not hurting for offense. They could use a couple more arms. And at the deadline, we'll kind of just lump both of the deals that they did in terms of the ones that are notable for their starting rotation. But Scherzer from the Mets and former New York Yankee, great Jordan Montgomery from the St. Louis Cardinals there. So obviously the Rangers look to bolster that rotation, adding those two guys in. I'm going to assume, I know they say you shouldn't assume, but I'm going to assume that you like the return in the Scherzer deal for the Mets more so than the Verlander one, just because of the high-end ceiling of the player they got back is probably higher. Is my assumption
Yeah, I
correct?
think Luis Angel Acuna is higher. I have him higher ranked than either of the guys from the Astros. He's really good. To quote Ronald Acuna Jr., who would know better than most because they're brothers, Ronald said Luis Angel is better than he was at that age, has a better feel for the zone, has better overall skill set. So Mets fans, do what you will with that. I still think his hit tool needs a little bit of refining, but the power and speed is right there with his older brother. And yeah, as our lovely producer is reminding us, there are some trades that are trickling in. So the Marlins got first baseman Josh Bell. I do not know what the return is for that, but there's two bats that the Marlins have gotten between Berger and Bell. Maybe if Berger goes Oppo Taco, then they'll go open a Taco Bell. I don't know. Ooh, Khalil Watson and Gene Segura are headed to Cleveland for Josh Bell. That is interesting.
Miami needed bats in the worst way. Like they're coming into the deadline, there were things that we knew that were going to happen.
Correct.
Or at least that we presumed. Like the Yankees would get a starter. There's a dig to the Yankees fans right there that they didn't do that. They've got Kenyon Middleton, of course, which that one will be in the trade deadline tracker. We'll write it up. It'll get all of about 4.5 sentences that I'll probably write up. So there is that one. But Miami was going to get a bat. When you looked at their farm system, you're the prospect guy, and I looked at your rankings. When you look at their top end prospects, it is pitcher heavy. And that's even with Yuri Perez graduating out of prospectum or whatever word you want to use, that he graduated from your list in there. So he's not even there. So I'm not even counting him. They dealt from a position of strength. Jake Berger's under team control until like 2047. So like that deal makes sense knowing how Miami loves to control their players. And then Josh Bell, I actually wrote about him in I believe it might have been the Fantasy Alarm draft guide that released in the beginning of the year, but his signing could be to turn out one of the better values of the offseason. And it's been okay at best in Cleveland. But I think now with Bell moving, that makes another deal that Cleveland did a little bit more interesting. And maybe we get to see a prospect with some notable pedigree coming up soon. But I want to come back to that in a second because I want to go back to the Jordan Montgomery deal going to Texas. They got, the Cardinals got back a couple of interesting prospects. I actually wrote this one up in the tracker, not you. And when you looked at it, Tekoa Roby's a very interesting guy, just doing a little digging on him. Very, very interesting potential there for him. So to me, I think the Cardinals actually did quite well from Montgomery in that Montgomery deal. But what about the deals, or I should say, what about the prospects that the Cardinals got in that deal? How do you think they fared out trading Montgomery after just getting him at the deadline last year?
I think Roby is very interesting. He's been dealing with some injuries in his time, but he's starting to put it together now that he's healthy. Now, looking at ERA for minor leaguers is not what we should be doing, right? So anybody that's sitting there telling you, "Oh, Roby's terrible," he's got a 5.05 ERA this year. Not ideal, but ERA is subjective. It takes into account errors, not errors, defense, ballparks that are all entirely different depending on the league you're in the minors and your team behind you and all that good stuff. So I don't pay attention to that. What I do pay attention to is that he's got a 50-12 strikeout to walk ratio in 46 and a third innings. That's pretty great, right? Anything better than a 3-1 ratio is nice, and he's over 4. Okay, so he's got some nice strikeout stuff. He's getting decent innings. He's made 10 starts this year, 46 and a third innings. So he's better than Kyle Harrison at staying in games, I guess, right? And I completely trust the Cardinals to develop pitching, or basically anybody at this point, because they've had a history of it. So Roby is a very interesting guy. He's got 4 above average pitches in my book. So if he can just stay healthy and get time on the mound, he's gonna be good. And then Thomas Sagasi is an interesting guy too. An infielder who does basically a little bit of everything well. Nothing really sticks out, but he's a Cardinal type guy. He plays a bunch of places and just puts bats on balls and lets things happen, right? He's kind of like a Brendan Donovan type guy who, by the way, underwent season-ending surgery today, or is going to. So I thought that was a pretty decent return for a guy that they picked up for an extra outfielder that the Yankees supposedly tried to trade but couldn't. I don't know. It was very interesting.
Actually, I actually wrote that exact thing about the infielder that the Cardinals got back, basically saying he's a max effort kind of player that the team and fans will come to love with time. That was over in the trade deadline tracker that we wrote up. And you talked about staying healthy. Another deal that went down at the deadline, Padres get Garrett Cooper and Sean Reynolds for Ryan Weathers. If Garrett Cooper could stay healthy, he'd be a 30 home run guy. The power's there. It's there. He just can't stay healthy. He's only played more than 100 games twice in his career, but this year he's already at 13 home runs in 82 games. He's got a 426 slug, which would be now a 3 out of the past 4 years. He's above 425 in that department. Now he goes to San Diego. That's a good little offense for him to now be a part of. And I mean, as pitcher friendly as San Diego kind of plays, Miami plays pretty pitcher friendly too. So it's at the worst net neutral in terms of parks. I'd give a slight upgrade, but shout out to Miami for kind of reworking that lineup because they get Jazz Chisholm back. Now they're putting in Josh Bell. They get Jake Berger and his home run or strikeout every at bat. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
he's hitting like his on base percentage is like 280, which not great for a dude who's got 25 home runs.
But they had to do it. And then with Cleveland trading Josh Bell to the Marlins, this was the trade. Or this now, I think, explains a different trade. So I know we had messaged each other a little bit about it. Aaron Savale goes to Tampa Bay.
Yes.
And Tampa Bay sends Kyle Manzardo, who's a very, very, very highly regarded prospect.
I have him in my top 10 in baseball. Yes.
Yes. I included that in the trade deadline tracker that we have at Fantasy Alarm. And here's the thing that was interesting to me. At first glance, last year, the Juan Soto deal was the one that netted all the big name prospects. Now this year, it's the Aaron Savale trade that nets a big name prospect. I know he's got team control. The Rays love that. Savale is a good but not great pitcher. I may be a little bit more skeptical of him than others. He's been very good this year. I will give him that. Although, to me, in the fantasy realm, he doesn't get the credit he deserves because he doesn't strike anybody out, and we all know that we love that in fantasy baseball. But Manzardo added some much needed power and first base help in that Cleveland system. So to me, I almost think, let me tell you what I think. And then the next part that comes with it. To me, it seems like the Rays overpaid for Savale because Manzardo is a very highly regarded prospect. However, if there's anything I've learned over the past couple of years, and I give them crap for it when we do our podcast, and I say, the Rays will Ray. They'll do these weird things. They did the opener. That became more mainstream. The whole Taj Bradley thing so he could learn to pitch on 5 days. That was weird. But all they do is get players and it works, or they trade players that they know aren't going to work, and then they falter in other team systems.
Correct.
I don't know what to make of any single bleeping trade that the Rays do, because every time I think they overpay or they screwed up, a couple of weeks later, boom, I look like the dummy. So make some light of this trade for me, or are my reactions at this time on August 1st valid?
I think what they needed was pitching depth right now. And the team control helps, right? Because Savali's under contract for like another 2 years, right? I think it's through 2025, if I'm not mistaken. And they've got some dudes who may be coming back this year, may not be, probably not till next year. So they'll worry about an overflow of pitchers in their rotation next year. And while Manzardo is great, we all believe he's a very good first base bat, which Cleveland probably needed at this point. There are 2 more dudes in their farm system that could come up right now and fill in that spot. Like Junior Caminero plays second base and third base, but could also probably play first base. But if you want Caminero at third base, you could stick a guy named Curtis Mead at first base or second base, right? Like the Rays are very good at plug and play dudes. And so they have, and Basabe could play first base too if we really wanted to. They have a guy who's not going to be up for a couple more years, but Xavier Isaac is a first base prospect they have who's 19, who's in their top 10 in their system. So like they just reload, man. They're good. And at this point, if I were Cleveland fans, I might wonder if there was something wrong with Manzardo because the Rays have a very good history of trading dudes that don't work out. Like name wise, like you can trade on credit if you're the Rays because they develop so many good dudes, right? But it's to the point where, and same with the Braves, if they're willing to offer you somebody, I would be a little cautious that they're not gonna pan out for you, and the Rays are actually gonna win the trade. So we'll see. Also, I like Savali's upside in Tampa. Because remember, we all thought that they were nuts for signing Zach Eflin to the deal they signed. The largest free agent contract in Tampa history went to Zach Eflin. What did he do before he got injured? He was dominant, man. He was striking out people left and right. The spin rates were up. They work wonders with pitchers. So I think they discovered something that they like about Savali and went for it.
Do you think, I'm guessing, I'll assume again, because I guess that's going to be my nature of the show. I'm just going to assume what you're going to say or thinking about it. For fantasy baseball managers out there that have Savali, they're excited about the move over to Tampa Bay. Can the Tampa Bay brass get some more strikeouts out of Savali?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought you'd say. You made
I
that.
mean, they got more out of Eflin than we thought.
True. It's just, can they do it with Savali? I mean, and Savali's good, not great.
Was anybody talking about Springs before he started starting for Tampa? No, not really,
No.
right? Like, they just get dudes, and when they step on the mound for Tampa, they strike everybody out as long as they're healthy, and then their arm falls off, and then they recycle, right? So we'll see. I would be concerned about injury with Savali, though, given the injury history with Tampa right now.
Do you think we see Manzardo before season's end in Cleveland?
I think as a September guy, yeah. I'm not sure you see him before September. Keep in mind, though, it is only a 28-man roster in September now, not the 40-man. So, we'll have to see where they are in the standings, but I would suspect that they would let him get a taste of the majors in September at this point, yeah.
I mean, you had him highly ranked in your system and or in your rankings and everything. Number 7, I had written down here 7 overall, second for the Rays. He has not been as good here in AAA of late.
He's been dealing with an injury that he's just getting over. So he had an injury that took him a little bit to get over, which explains the slump of late. But he's starting to turn it back around.
And then one other pitcher deal that came in when the Dodgers missed, or not really missed, but Eduardo Rodriguez nixed the deal. They did get Ryan Yarbrough from the Royals. So the Dodgers do add to their rotation / long relief / bullpen, whatever.
Yeah, they also traded
capacity he's going to fill. Too. You what?
They traded Phil Bickford.
Yep. Yep. So that was in that. And then in the bullpen, we always see the bullpen deals. A lot of times, it's middle reliever for middle reliever, or closer becomes setup man on their new teams. We had 2 where I at least think the roles are very clearly defined. So the first one, Toronto wanted bullpen help. They go get Jordan Hicks from St. Louis. Cardinals weren't going to get Hicks on a deal, on like a multi-year deal, so it made sense that they were going to trade him. That's pretty much the same reason for Flaherty getting dealt, because it was time to move on in that regards. But Jordan Hicks is Jordan Romano insurance. Romano's on the IL right now, I believe, with a ailing back. So for now, I know a question popped up in our Discord about it. I know I had answered it, but Hicks is probably going to close games for Toronto now, and then Romano comes back. I would assume Romano closes, Hicks becomes primary setup man, but in that regard, Jordan Hicks has finally dipped into the strikeout potential. He's always been this guy that could throw 117 miles an hour, but he never struck anybody out, and it made no sense. And he's finally dipped his toes into the strikeout waters this season. So talk about this move for Toronto and really the value of him in the bullpen down the stretch for this team.
Well, we saw what the Braves did when they traded for Raisel Iglesias last year, right? Like, they had a lockdown closer, and then they added Raisel Iglesias, and what happened? They were a dominating bullpen. So I think the Blue Jays needed that. Could they have used a starter? Probably, because Chris Bassett's not right. I don't know what's I don't know what happened to Chris Bassett, but he's not right. But if you're not going to get depth out of your starting rotation, then you need depth in your bullpen. So I like this move a lot. I think it gives them some matchup possibilities. Gives Romano a little bit, even when he's healthy, it gives him some off time down the stretch so he can be 100% good for what we expect to be a postseason run for Toronto, considering the fact that the Red Sox and Yankees, who are behind them, didn't really do very much at all at the deadline. Yeah, I mean, the Red Sox just got Luis Urias, but does that really move the needle? I don't know. So yeah, I mean, depth in the bullpen is key, but there is one bullpen move that I am very curious to get your opinion on, which is Andrew Chafin being sent to the Brewers from the Diamondbacks. The
Yeah.
Diamondbacks needed bullpen help. That's why they traded for Paul Sewald, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go and ship one of their better arms out. Like, there's been 3 other dudes that have been blowing leads left, right, and sideways for the Diamondbacks, and Chafin wasn't really one of them. Not only did they ship Chafin out of town, they sent him to a team that they're tied with in the standings for the wild card right now. And I don't know what they got back. I think it's a player to be named later, maybe cash. I don't know. But what are your thoughts on Chafin being like? It's a weird move.
It is a weird move because it's one of those things where it's like last year when the Yankees dealt Montgomery, we talked about it. Like, the Yankees need starting pitching. Why are you trading a starting pitcher?
Right.
Like, it's one of those things. I wrote about it in the Paul Sewald deal. With the Diamondbacks at the 7th worst ERA among its bullpen and high leverage situation, the 3rd lowest left on base percentage. They don't strand runners. They haven't done it. So they made the deal with the Mariners to basically solidify the 9th inning. Then you can move Chafin into the setup role along with the other bunch of dudes that they have there in the back end of that. Now they trade Chafin out to Milwaukee. They got some other reliever who's not as good as Chafin, and Chafin's going to go to Milwaukee and serve a need. They need another lefty arm in that pen. Interestingly enough, if I remember correctly, Chafin has not been as good against lefties this year as he's normally been, which is pretty interesting
Yeah,
for
I think
him.
he's
But I
actually
think,
got reverse splits.
yeah, but that has not been the case more often than not. He's usually better against lefties. So yeah, it's a weird move to trade from a position that you probably went into the deadline, knew that you were going to address. And as good as Paul Sewald is, it's not like just getting him, I would say, well, our bullpen's good now. Now we can move pieces from it. Like, he definitely helps, sure, but I'm still not calling it a position of strength yet. Just because
No.
you got one guy. Like, you didn't add Shohei Ohtani, you didn't add a Justin Verlander, you added a very good reliever, but you need more because even at his best, he can go out there, he can throw immaculate innings every single time he goes out there. But guess what? He's probably not throwing more than 3 days in a row. He's not throwing every day. This team's going to be leading ball games. You want as many good arms in the back end of your bullpen as possible. Arizona dealt one.
Yeah. Now, if Arizona had gone out and gotten a starter along with Paul Sewald and then dealt Chafin, I wouldn't have as big of an issue with it because now you're getting extra innings from the rotation that you weren't getting, so your bullpen won't be so thin. But as a standalone, and then they went out and got Tommy Pham, which they don't need more outfielders.
It's like we talked about. They needed a right-handed bat. That's pretty much a right-handed outfielder because all their guys are left-handed. So I mean, I get it. I understand the move to an extent.
I mean, I guess, but like, who's not getting at bats now to get Tommy Pham into that lineup?
But it's a good problem to have in reality.
Are you taking out Alec Thomas because he's a Gold Glove defensive caliber center fielder? You're not taking out Corbin Carroll, and you already have Lapina, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and Jake McCarthy splitting time in left field. So, are you taking out one righty bat for another because the guy who was an all-star is slumping? I don't know. It's a confusing trade. That aside from the Paul Sewald move, which was good, and then they backfilled the Josh Rojas need with Jace Peterson. Pretty reasonable. Those 2 moves were good. The rest of it was confusing for the Diamondbacks. I don't know what they did.
And as in the comments there, James Grande told us Scott Barlow goes to the Padres, and it's Carlos Hernandez season in Kansas City. I love I love Carlos Hernandez because for a guy who's 0-6 on the year, the love and infatuation for this guy is awesome, and I love it. And when you look at the numbers, like there is a legitimate case to be made. Like
Yeah.
he's not your everyday 0-6 pitcher. Like 1 save on the year, 10 holds. Okay, that's all good, but 3.57 ERA is what it is. But then you got the 2.73 FIP, the 3.49 xFIP. He's finally striking batters out like he did in the early ranks through his minor league career. Carlos Hernandez is going to be a guy to look at. And, we've talked about it multiple times over at fantasyalarm.com. We've been breaking down all these deals, all the ones that have rolled in since we've gone live will get added in. We'll get added into the tracker that we have over there. But if you do have any questions, of course, you can ask us in the Discord. If you're in there, you can try a 7-day free trial, which gets you access to everything over there on the site that you need, www.fantasyalarm.com/allpro. Ask Matt, ask me, ask John, ask James, ask Reelan, ask anybody in those channels what we need to make of any of these moves. And then, Matt, one last thing just from the Paul Sewald deal, Andres Munoz in Seattle.
Yep. It's finally his time.
There's the elite closer the rest of the way in Seattle. So he's the one you need to know. And then two other pitcher moves that happened early on. Lucas Giolito and Lance Lynn were both moved. But other than those two, any other pitcher deals you find significant that haven't been mentioned yet that you want to talk about before we head over to the offensive side of the ball with a couple of trades that'll definitely not generate as much interest as maybe some of the names dealt from on the mound, but worth talking about nonetheless.
I don't know. I mean, the Yankees just traded for Spencer Howard from the Rangers. Okay, but he hasn't really been able to get anybody out at the major league level, and he's been injured.
I think we'll be talking about the Yankees a little bit later. That's just a guess.
Yeah. Jack Flaherty, interesting move from the O's. They had feelers out on Dylan Cease. I don't know what it was going to cost them to get Dylan Cease. Probably a lot, because Cease is under contract for 2.5 years, and he's a legitimate ace. And he was the only big arm left on the market. Jack Flaherty's a rental, and if he can stay healthy, I don't know what they get out of him. To be perfectly honest, I have no idea what you're going to get out of Jack Flaherty. So but it didn't cost him very much.
And so, I think that's the thing, because when other teams were probably trying to trade Baltimore, like they were sniffing around all the big pitchers, they had to. They have enough prospects to do it. Teams that probably went to Baltimore, or they were like, hey, if you're interested in one of our guys, sure, we're just going to want 3 top prospects. And for Baltimore, 3 top prospects are better than probably anybody else. Like Baltimore's got such the deep farm system.
Jackson Holliday is the number one. Yeah, Jackson Holliday is their number one prospect and number 1 overall in baseball in my book. But there's no way they're dealing him. Like there's no way. Could they have given up like Heston Kjerstad and Colton Cowser and gotten a pretty decent arm? I would like to think that that's a better deal for, say, Justin Verlander. But maybe JV didn't want to go back home. I don't know. And for those of you wondering why we're still seeing trades file in, it happens every year. The trade was submitted before the deadline. People just don't find out about it until afterwards. I don't know. Nothing else really moves the needle starting wise for me. I mean, Giolito is nice, but we knew about that about a week ago. Lance Lynn, I have no idea what to expect from him going forward. So I don't know. But the AL West arms race between Scherzer and Verlander is going to be fun to watch down the stretch.
It sure will. And some of the pitchers that weren't dealt of note, Mitch Keller and David Bednar in Pittsburgh. Obviously, Dylan Cease didn't get moved, and Eduardo Rodriguez tried to get moved, but he ended up nixing the deal. So, Matt, let's talk a little bit about some hitters that have moved. We talked about Jake Burger a little bit already. Let's go to the deal with the Cubs, where they got your boy from Washington. So, I saw that you tweeted about this. You welcomed one of the new prospects with a very, very heartfelt tweet, which I love to see.
Yeah, his dog liked the tweet. So I've gotten tweets liked by prospects' moms and dogs. I'm on a run here.
You can't ask for much more than that. But break down the Candelario trade for me.
So I think I think it's a pretty even trade, right? The Cubs needed a bat. I was pretty happy to see that they were going to be buyers at the deadline, because I thought they should be. Why not? I mean, I know Marcus Stroman's been terrible down the last 7 starts, but Belly's turned it around. They needed a bat, and Jamer was the best one on the board. And now, by the way, he goes back to the team that signed him originally. For those who don't remember, he was blocked by a guy named Chris Bryant. So they traded Jamer Candelario to the Tigers in the Nick Castellanos rental deal when Castellanos was a Cub. So I think it's a nice move for Jamer. He played really, really well in DC. Couldn't have asked for a better half season from him. I am sad that the Nats did not re-sign him or extend him because I thought it would be nice to have him there and let their third base prospects develop a little bit in Brady House and Morales, who they just drafted. But the return, I thought was pretty nice. Those people who want to dog Mike Rizzo because he had 8 teams interested and they think that Rizzo turned down a top 100 prospect to go with this Cubs deal, I don't see where that would have been on the table. Maybe if he had held out until 5:45 tonight, maybe, but it wasn't really that big of a bat market. So getting DJ Hers from the Cubs he's very interesting. There's a lot of difference between his floor and his ceiling. Okay. His floor is a high strikeout lefty reliever. That's pretty nice. We can deal with that. His ceiling is a mid-rotation lefty starter. What's holding him up? Control. The dude walks a lot of people. This year, he's walking 5.94 dudes per 9 innings. Not great. He's striking out a ton. He struck out 80 dudes in 59 innings, but he's walked like 38. So that's not great. He's got kind of a wonky crossbody delivery. He sits in the low 90s, which for a lefty is fine as long as it's got movement. You can kind of keep guys off base. He's got an elite changeup. Pretty good slider. The curveball still developing. So we'll see. He's not a finished product. Might have gotten a starter. At least got a high strikeout reliever. Kevin Made, the shortstop, 19 years old. Look, in my opinion, he's a throwback middle infielder. He's going to make some decent contact, not a lot of pop, decent amount of speed, Gold Glove caliber defense, right? So his ceiling is a decent contributor at the bottom of an order who can play very good defense in the middle. His floor is a late inning defensive guy or a second baseman you spell Luis Garcia or whoever you stick there long term. So overall, I think it's a pretty decent return for a rental. I'm happy Lane Thomas did not go. I'm pretty happy Kyle Finnegan's still there. Relievers are kind of iffy to me. May as well keep them if nobody's offering you anything. But overall, I think it's a nice depth move for bolstering the Nats farm system.
Just how big of a role can those two play in the Nats rebuild? Like, can they be prominent figures in it and eventually like fantasy assets, or do you think it's more of like
I don't think
better
Kevin Made
reality
is
than
going to be a fantasy asset because I don't know where, like, unless he massively improves in power, like, he's not a big dude. He's like 5'9", 160. So getting more power out of him, he's not Altuve, right? That's not going to happen. Plus, he's he's technically a shortstop right now, which makes him a little blocked because obviously there's a dude named CJ Abrams there. If you keep Brady House at shortstop, then there's another guy in front of him. But if DJ Hers turns into an actual starter, you can get a high strikeout number 4 starter out of him. Could be fantasy relevant. If he's a high strikeout reliever, I don't think there's a ton of, unless you're in Selz leagues. It's not like they're vital to the rebuild like the guys they got for Soto.
And then continuing with the Mets teardown, I guess I can call it.
Yeah.
Traded Mark Canha to the Milwaukee Brewers. I wrote up in the tracker over there. I said, unfortunately for Milwaukee, he's been better against righties than lefties, which means he's going to fit right in perfectly with his new team. And those that make MLB DFS lineups attack player props on your whatever site you choose, you can continue to run your left-handed pitchers out there against Milwaukee and be fine. So Canha was a guy before the year. I kind of liked him. Cheap power, cheap speed. I thought he'd be a little bit better than what he's been this year with just a 245 average and 381 slug through 89 games, 6 homers, 7 steals. If you play an OBP, he's been better thanks to his willingness to take free passes and see that fourth ball. But outside of that, going to Milwaukee, to me, this is going to be one of those moves where it's going to help the Brewers in reality because they get another quality bat and serviceable outfielder. But for fantasy, it's going to muddy the waters in that outfield. It's going to take at bats for someone. The Brewers added Carlos Santana. He's playing first or DH. Once, they got Owen Miller, they can move him around. Their outfield is chock full of players. Again, this move is good for the Brewers in reality, but for fantasy, it's going to create a headache.
Correct. Yep. I mean, there's nothing more really to be. I mean, him not being good along with every other Met is the reason why the Mets tore down, right? Like if the Mets were doing what they were supposed to do at a $377 million payroll, they wouldn't have traded Scherzer or Verlander or Kana or any of the other or Tommy Pham or any of the other four dudes that they were talking about trading, or Dave Robertson for that matter. They wouldn't have done it. So I agree it's a better reality trade than fantasy, but when teams are making trades, they're not caring about your fantasy team. They just want to make the playoffs and have a shot at the title.
How dare they?
I know, right? A little mean.
I mean, they should care about the 11 teams that I have. Where on each different team, I need different things to happen. Like, they should be aware of that.
They should know which team I'm sacrificing at bats for the betterment of the other one that actually made the playoffs versus the one that didn't, and there's more money on the line for that one. They should definitely be all over my best balls and see what I need.
I'm not asking for much, just to care about my fantasy team and maybe not as much your reality team. Your $1 billion entity, your $1 billion venture versus my $20 buy-in. Come on, let's think about it here. But I digress. Anyway, and then last but not least, in the last edition of our podcast, we kind of talked about how I was very, very skeptical of what the Angels were doing, because it was like, this could all be for nothing. You're going to bring in all these pieces just to watch Ohtani walk at the season's end. They go out and they get CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk from Colorado. The more I came around to it, I'm going to flip my stance a little bit. Do I love it? No, I still don't love it. But I'm at the point where you had said last week, you have to respect what they're doing. And I do respect that they are trying, and they're trying to put the pieces around this team. I believe Mike Trout's going to start swinging a bat soon.
And he had dry swings, I think, today. Yeah.
Yep. So he's working his way back. You can mix him into the lineup at some point. They've added some pieces here at the deadline. They made an active attempt to go for it. And for a team that has been, I hate to say not relevant because they have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, but for a team in reality in terms of team's performance and finishing in the standings, for a team that has been largely not relevant for a couple years with two of the game's best, it's good to see them actually making a move for it. It could still all be all for nothing at the season's end if Ohtani walks, but you got to give them credit. And it's one of those things where they're going for it. I have to respect that they're at least attempting this and not just trying to flounder the rest of the way, and fingers crossed that Shohei doesn't leave us that season.
So let me put forward, because I had the stance that I respect what they're doing, and the more I look at it, I'm of the belief that Ohtani stays with the Angels. I don't think it's going to take $600 million to sign him. I think he's going to take a steep discount to stay with the Angels because they let him have free reign to do whatever the heck he needs to do to be this good at baseball. Not to mention that the endorsement deals he has vastly outweighs the salary he makes in baseball right now. Like, it's not even close. And those, I don't think, will translate very well to a lot of places. Sure, if he goes to New York, sure. But are we also sure that he's going to be this good in a major media market? Like, if he goes to the Dodgers, there's a lot more pressure than when he's on the Angels. So, but one last thing. Are we so sure that the Angels would, like, if people didn't get hurt, are we so sure that the Angels would be, like, anywhere close to thinking about trading Ohtani? You realize they have an entire infield on the IL right now? Logan O'Hoppe, Max Stassi. There's catcher in first. Rendon, third base, for whatever it's worth. Brendan Drury, second base. Gio Urshela could play third base. Joe Adell is on the IL. Mike Trout's still there, and now Taylor Ward's got a broken face thanks to Alek Manoah. That's an entire starting lineup that's on the IL, and then you have Shohei Ohtani at DH. So they basically had to remake their entire starting lineup around him, and they're still in the playoff picture.
It's like the AL West version of the Rays, where they have an injured starting rotation that could compete and maybe be a top unit in third of baseball. Like
And I mean, Griffin Canning just got injured for the pitching staff. If he wasn't injured, they have 7 starting pitchers between Canning, who's now injured, Otani, Detmers, Tyler Anderson, Chase Selz, Sandoval, and now Lucas Giolito. It's actually not a bad. I mean, they're right. So, like, if
this is going to be a headache when they all get healthy in fantasy.
it's going to be insane because we don't know where anybody's playing or who's losing. Because, like, when Trout comes back, who are you kicking out of the outfield between Hunter Renfroe, Mickey Moniak, and Randall Grichuk?
Yeah, I mean they're gonna be able to platoon. They're gonna platoon with the best of them.
I'm guessing the Grichuk and Renfroe platoon probably because I don't think you can take Moniak out of that lineup right now. He's been ridiculous.
Yeah. When he cools off, though, he'll be an easy sit against lefties. That'll occur.
Right, but like
that's if he cools down, though. I guess I don't know if we should assume it. I mean,
he was a number one overall good.
Yeah. So, yep. So Matt, we got about 10, 15-ish minutes here. We got to do it. Winners and losers here at the MLB Trade Deadline. I will go first with a winner that I have. I'm going back to the Kyle Manzardo deal, and I love what Cleveland did. Getting him, adding him into their system. They have done well in the past, moving pitchers through. They've done fine. I understand health has been an issue. I get it, but it is what it is. But Manzardo is a big-time prospect at a position and with a profile that system desperately needed. This team in 3 years isn't going to care if they have Aaron Savali or not. They're just not.
Correct.
Let's be honest. He's good.
They've got about 4 starting pitchers they could call up and replace Savali.
Exactly. And you don't get many chances with a guy like Manzardo. They get to add him in there. I really like, solely from that deal, I really like what Cleveland did at the deadline, mainly because of that trade alone, getting Manzardo in there. Who's a winner at the deadline for you?
So this is interesting. I may have to go with Miami at this point. Mm-hmm. Like fixing what they needed, and yes, did they give up Jake Eater? Yeah, that stings. But they just drafted the 2 of the best pitchers in this year's draft. So they've replenished, where Jake Eater was. They still have Yuri Perez down in the minors, who's coming back up. Sixto Sanchez, if he ever stays healthy, he could come up. There's a bunch of dudes. So Miami getting years of control on Jake Burger, who's
roughly 2047.
Yeah, who's finally healthy after 2 torn Achilles tendons. That's a pretty nice bat. Josh Bell, if he could figure it out this year, has not been great, but then again, everybody in Cleveland sucked this year. That's pretty solidly deep. I mean, the top 6 of their lineup now is Luis Ariz, Jorge Soler, Brian De La Cruz, Jazz Chisholm, Jake Burger, Josh Bell. Mm-hmm. That's pretty solid. I mean, Avisail Garcia has been terrible in the batter's box for them since they signed him. Joey Wendell could still, do all right. Jacob Stallings is just a defensive catcher, right? Mm-hmm. He's not going to make or break. And then let's not forget that they have John Birdie on the bench who can come in and jack like 47 bases when he's not even a starting player. And their starting staff is pretty good. I mean, we talked about Yuri Perez in the minors. Their starting staff is Alcantara, Braxton Garrett, Cueto, Luzardo, and Edward Cabrera. That's pretty solid. Mm-hmm. So I would say that for not giving up much, I mean, they did give up Jake Eater, but they have basically as much years of control of Burger as they do of Eater. I think they win at this point.
Yep. I like what they did as well. Another one that I have, it's a bit chalky, but I'll say it anyway. Texas did what they needed to do. They got arms. They added the rotation. They got a good one in Max Scherzer, hoping that he can find that elite form again, and then a very reliable Jordan Montgomery. That's, at the end of the day, Jordan Montgomery's not going to be – it's kind of like last year. He's not the sexy move that you make at the deadline. He's not the one that's going to set Twitter ablaze in a positive way because of his play. But all he does is go out there. He'll give you 5 to 6 very solid innings. He keeps you in games. And for him to be that team's SP maybe 3 at the high end, 5 at the back end. You can't ask for much more than that. So I think Texas did exactly what they needed to do. And while Jonah Heim is injured, they also got Austin Hedges, former Pittsburgh great. He can't hit a lick at all. I mean, it's been like 5 years since he hit above the Mendoza line. Defensive-minded catcher, very, very good defensively.
I would expect him to be Scherzer's private catcher.
That seems very much in play. So that move has no effect on fantasy, and I mean no effect.
No.
But in reality,
it's
very,
very
very impactful. I guess technically it could impact Scherzer.
Also, by the way, Luis Angel Acuna only qualifies at short and second, which he wasn't going to play for Texas anyway because they have two dudes named Marcus Semien and Corey Seager who are going to be there for a very long time. And if you move him to center field, he's also probably blocked in center field in Texas anyway too. So his path to the major stays the same going to the Mets, which is what I wrote up. Another winner for me.
I'll tell you another one because I said it earlier. It's Andres Munoz in Seattle. That one's for the
I mean, if we're going with a specific player,
massive winner. Oh yeah, we can do whatever we want. Show.
If we're going with a specific player, it's certainly Andres Munoz. I think Jamer is a winner because he's going to an offense that better equipped to, help him keep his counting stats up. He gets to play for a team that's in it as opposed to a team that's not. I'm curious to know who your losers are, though, because we could go a bunch of different ways.
Well, in the sheet that we had, I had the Orioles written down, but I had to remove them. I don't know if they're necessarily winners per se because if they only getting Jack
Flaherty. But I don't know they're losers because if Flaherty works out, then they did what they needed to, and I don't know if they fully needed an ace starter. I don't know.
And even if Flaherty doesn't pan out, they made a move that it was of a position that they had to. They had to get another arm. They were going.
It didn't cost them anything.
So one loser, I have one, but I might save it for you because I'll be nice because that's just kind of my mantra here. But can I say the Reds?
Yes.
The only thing you do is Sam Mull. That's it. And
you had players that are you have prospects that are highly regarded that are blocked.
And I understand
blocked, and you couldn't pair them to go get a Dylan Cease or Jack Flaherty and give it a shot. Like you couldn't get beat to the punch to Lucas Giolito for goodness sakes. I'm with you.
I don't get it. And you could argue like the guy that they gave up, Boyle, I forget his first name, he may end up being better.
Yeah.
Like maybe not this year, but it's just one of those. I just don't get it. They needed an arm. I understand Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo in theory are coming back from injury. I get it. But for everything that's, I don't want to poo-poo on their parade, but for everything that's gone right for them this year, why not keep doubling down? Go get an arm. This team has not been good for a while. They went from, you and I admittedly had them at the bottom of the NL Central. We did. I'll say it.
Yeah.
I thought Pittsburgh would be ahead of them. Everything has gone right. Everything has gone right. Double down. Get yourself an arm. I understand they wanted a starter with years of control. I get it. It's what they were looking for. I do not like what the Reds did with their current state of affairs and their lack of activity at the deadline. No thank you for me.
Yeah, that NL Central is open for them to go take. And you have Noelvi Marte, who's probably blocked now by like 3 different dudes on the major league roster, right? He's still pretty highly regarded. Cam Collier, probably blocked by a few dudes. Carlos Jorge, also likely blocked by some dudes. So I don't understand. And the rumors were that you could trade Jonathan India. You got 6 dudes you can move, and you didn't move any of them. And I understand that, offense wins you games at Great American Small Park, but that was confounding to me. Not as confounding as my loser, though. But
let's hear it. I hope it's the one I got.
The hell were you doing, Yankees?
Yeah, it's the one.
Either sell or buy. Do something. John Heyman, as much as I dislike him and I think he's a shill for the Mets, said the last time the Yankees came into the trade deadline with a record this bad was 2016, and they were the biggest seller at that deadline. They dealt Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs. They dealt Andrew Miller they dealt some other pieces. Like, it was a huge sell-off. And then they wound up winning a little bit at the end of it, and they, got some key pieces. I know that you've now switched to I love, like, that they love their prospects and they want to get under the luxury tax and whatever. But in the meantime, the team sucks. It can't hit. The hitting coach being fired and then hiring the new guy hasn't changed anything. The only team in baseball with fewer hits than the Yankees right now is the Oakland A's. Like, you needed a left fielder. You're telling me you couldn't go get Teoscar Hernandez for nothing? You couldn't go get Tommy Pham for nothing? Like, you needed a pitcher. None of those guys. I don't know. It further cements my belief that Brian Cashman needs to be fired. I don't care that he signed a 4-year extension at the beginning of the season. I think the fact that the Yankees have a winning record right now is, despite what happened yesterday with Domingo Germán being scratched from his start and then being an hour later being deemed healthy enough to go bail them out from a 5-1 deficit and pitch 5 scoreless, whatever the heck that was, and Boone has his weird deals. Cashman needs to be fired. Like, he has no clue what he's doing. He slept through a deadline that could have shaped the team, and the Yankees lost. One reliever? Really? One?
Yep. Well, and Spencer Howard too. Spencer Howard and Kenny Middleton. That's what the
guy
Yankees got.
Spencer Howard has a 7.20 ERA in the majors.
Hey, I'm just reading the news. That's all I'm doing for you. But yes, I agree. Yankees are losers. Yankees are one of those teams that, like, they're going to sniff around everybody. It's like that person in your fantasy league that sniffs around everybody. Hey, are they available? Hey, are they available? And then they'll never make an offer on them. That's the Yankees mantra.
Brian Cashman is atrocious. He's atrocious. He's so bad he made Billy Epler look good.
Let's end it on that one. That's a great comment to end it on. Make sure you tweet that. But of course, head over to fantasyalarm.com. We're going to break down all the deals, even the ones we haven't written up yet. We'll get them up on the site over at fantasyalarm.com. Remember, you can go to fantasyalarm.com/all-pro and you can get everything we got over there. All the premium content, DFS, seasonal, and Discord. So you can at Colby Conway, at Matt Selz, ask your questions, at John and Pemba, and ask all of your questions.
And so I will have a new top 400 prospects list out tomorrow with prospects on their new teams, new rankings, new team rankings, all that good stuff.
Even better. So you'll get that as well. So of course, over on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it, give me a follow at Colby R. Conway. Matt Selz is at the Selzman, and we will see you later this week with the next edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast.